Yo, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Patch 3.17 brought a number of new unique items, including this here unique set of gloves, Black Zenith. Black Zenith is an interesting set of gloves that has a number of things about them, but they're also being the target of an emergency fix. This fix hasn't gone live yet at the time I'm recording this video, but is likely to go live anytime shortly. So what these gloves do thematically is they allow you to take one spell that you socket in it, and it must be a projectile spell that deals damage with hits, and to juice that spell up at the cost of only having the ability to cast it once per 4 seconds. So it has a 4-second cooldown addition to the spell, which in most cases is going to go from no cooldown to 4 seconds. The spell fires 4 additional projectiles, so sort of like having greater multiple projectiles attached, but with no cost and no drawback. Socketed spells projectile spells deal 150% more damage with hits, so this is like having 2.5 extra damage supports on it. And the spells fire in a circle, which is something that just gives you new ways to target behind you. In short, it changes the behavior of one of your skills pretty substantially. Most builds haven't been using it, but it is something that's an interesting interaction that you can at least play around with. However, Black Zenith is also completely and utterly broken at the moment in conjunction with Spell Totem. The way that Path of Exile skills with cooldowns normally work with Spell Totem is that both the Spell Totem and the active Conjuring Spell Totems both have the cooldown. So if you can test this with Cold Snap if you want, if you link Cold Snap to a totem, then the totem can cast Cold Snap on cooldown, and then your ability to replace that totem is also put on a cooldown. However, when you conjure a fresh totem, it can immediately cast a Cold Snap. So basically the way it works is that you cast your spell totem, the totem immediately casts Cold Snap, and then a few seconds later, you can cast your second totem. At that point, your spell totem will likely have come off cooldown, and so both of your totems can now cast Cold Snap. Then in a couple more seconds, assuming all the totems are still alive, you can then cast another one, and all 3 of them roughly at the same time get to fire off a new Cold Snap. This, generally speaking, isn't very useful, and most people don't make builds around spell totems that have cooldowns. However, a couple of people did some investigation with Black Zenith and found out that actually this was not happening at all on these gloves. So the Black Zenith gloves were completely ignoring the cooldown that was added to the ability for the player to conjure a new totem. The most powerful use case for this was alongside Winter Orb, and I deliberately didn't make a video around this because I did think that there was a reasonable chance that this interaction was unintended and GGG would nerf it. And that's what's going to be what's going to happen. So you could cast a Winter Orb totem. That thing would immediately start getting all the benefits of Black Zenith. And as soon as the Winter Orb went on cooldown, you could then just immediately replace it. Or you could conjure multiple totems at once via the use of Black Zenith. Fire them all down at once. So the thing that forced GGG's hand to act on this, as far as I can tell, I'm not 100% certain of this, but it does look like there's been either a case of wide-scale multiboxing, where a small number of players have been doing all of the boss content that takes place in one room and running a huge number of computers at once. Now, this obviously pushes up the cost of the entry fee into the boss fights and suppresses the value of the actual rewards from them, and as a result ends up hurting everyone that is running those bosses without doing a multiboxing setup. I've also heard rumors that this has been being botted as well. Again, I can't confirm that it's being botted. I definitely know it's been being multi-boxed though. So people would have Black Zenith setups on 5 or 6 different computers at once, and they'd just be running through all of these invitations at the same time. Maven's invitations were some of the best, but it wasn't just them. You could do it with simulacrums. You do it with a whole lot of other content. And so ultimately, the changes are being made as an emergency patch rather than being held off to the next league, because otherwise you're going to see a situation where basically nothing in the game that comes from a boss room or from anything that can be multi-boxed will be worth anything, and all of the bossing in the game will basically be dead. Anyways, that's what's happening with Black Zenith. Are these gloves still worth using? I think there's some potential niche cases that might be at least worth investigating with them. I don't think they're quite good enough, and I feel like the numbers need to be a little bit higher for them. If it wasn't 150% more damage with hits, if it was 180, 190, then at that point I think they might actually get there. But otherwise, I don't think they're quite good enough to use on most builds. That said, it's an interesting playstyle, the idea of just having one big thing that you can fire off on cooldown. It's almost like a build your own Val skill. That's all I got on this. May your Val orbs have interesting results.